All right, good to see you here tonight. My goodness, we got all kind of amplification here, haven't we? All right, yes, everybody stand if you will, please. We'll get started. We didn't drag out a lot of books. We're going to sing songs that you already know, so let back and let it go. There is power in the blood. Good. Read from the 39th. There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Victory. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. We're going to put the four powers in it on the chorus now, if you will. All right, just follow me. Here we go. Would you dream of your passion in God? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, 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 wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, 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 wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be whiter, much whiter than snow? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Sin's name was lost in His life-giving blood. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, 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 wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, 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 wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you in service for Jesus your King? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you with David His praises and sing? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, 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 wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, 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 wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. And all of God's children said, Amen. Remain standing if you would as we go forward in prayer. But give me thought to work your way up here. We are live streaming tonight, Lord willing. And we have some folks that's supposed to be different areas, different places, watching, listening, and we welcome you aboard tonight. Welcome you tonight
for our company. First one that we've had out here under this pavilion. We call it pavilion, you call it the shelter, call it the tabernacle, call it what you will. But tonight is God's house. And boy, I'm glad that you're here. There's no accident for the Lord, and so that was good singing a while ago. And I want you to do this. Whenever we sing, I want you to sing loud enough they can hear you down in the mobile home park down here. I want all the neighbors up this way to hear, them through the woods to hear. And, we'll just really ring it out for the glory of God. And so tonight, please keep this in mind. We are meeting. This is God's house tonight. And so I'm like the gentleman that said, I like to go to God's house when he's at home. And he told me he'd be here if we just gathered together in his name. And so tonight, please remember, think about somebody you know personally, individually that doesn't know God's faithfulness. Think about somebody tonight who is out of the will of God, and they need to get back where they need to pray for them. And then tonight, there is a host of folks that we can pray for in this city. And that, every day of our life, there's somebody else that is sick. And so we just want to remember them, this day windows especially tonight, in the ICU, and so many tonight. My wife's daughter in the hospital over in Hopkins. So many tonight that needs a great physician. I'm glad, thank God, he does house calls. He not only does house calls, he don't even require co-payment. But anyway, please remember these tonight and pray. And ask God just to meet with us that night. Will you pray for the special singing? You pray for God's man tonight. We're looking for something from God. So, but again, if you were our prayer.
Father, we approach the throne of grace. Lord, thank you for the privilege to come to the place of the community. We're thankful for the fellowship we already had. We're thankful for the singing we've already heard. But more importantly than that, Lord, we come here from your word. Yes. God, we ask you to touch your man, Lord. We ask you to anoint him. Lord, I'm thankful for a church that has a burden for this young generation. It's time to go to hell. God, it seems like everybody's complacent. Everybody's looking for excuses and using COVID and everything else. And God, I'm thankful for people that have a burden for all this generation. God, I ask you to honor. Lord, we know your word will return, Lord, but Lord, we ask you to honor. Lord, for those young people here that are saved, Lord, maybe by guilty businesses, not on fire for you, maybe they'll be rekindled. Lord, if there's anyone more importantly than anything, if there's any lost person here tonight, Lord, we ask you to save the people, Lord. Lord, we know we have many concerns. We're seeing this stuff didn't mention, Lord. We ask you to go to be a great position. Do what you need to do. But more importantly than anything right now, we ask you to help us to shut our mind out from the world around us. Help us to focus on what it is you have for us, Lord, tonight. God, help us, Lord, just to worship you in spirit and truth tonight, Lord. If we can't do it, if you don't help us, we ask you for your help, Lord. God, we ask you to just show up, show out, and do something great every night. In Christ's name we pray.
Everybody told you that Jesus was. If you'll notice out just to my right, there's some cones out through here, and we've asked this week that, you know anybody that needs to come and stay in the vehicle, they're welcome to do so. So that means nobody can park there. It just means we kind of reserve those people that needs to stay in the vehicle, and so they stay. And we welcome them out there as well tonight. Well, we listen. The Bible said, "Come before His presence with singing," and I like good singing, and I like singing that loves God. In fact, I'm going to give you a nickel to hear somebody sing that doesn't love God. And so we have the Davis family. Y'all come on up here, sing for us, and I want you to worship tonight. And by the way, always our altar is always open, always open in every service.
He was led to Golgotha on the outskirts of town, headed there to a cross. His followers gathered round. The sky his mother and some friends get to carry him away. They were trying to speak to a broken heart, what only tears could say. The sunset cast a shadow on the world's darkest day, and with one last look they laid him in the grave. On to him today, and my cares all melt away. He made me feel like life had just begun. He said all of my trials to be turned into triumph, through the victory that he's already won. And I talked to him today, and the comfort that he gave, it filled me with desire to tell the world that on Calvary he died, but right now he's alive. I know, because I talked to him today. Yeah. Billy Magdalene came breathless to the place where he lay. He was searching through his broken heart, trying to find the faith to pray. As he heard a joyful story, his sorrow could not stay, and his hopes spring about the words he heard her say. Talk to him today, and I cares all fell away. He made me feel like life had just begun. He said all of my trials could be turned into triumph, through the victory that he's already won. And I talked to him today, and the comfort that he gave, it filled me with desire to tell the world that on Calvary he died, but right now he is alive. I know, because I talked to him today. Oh, see the Lord. Hallelujah, Christ alone. I know, because I talked to him today. He was born in a stable, in a barn manger. He bore a love to be the one string. He followed the call to run into town. He followed the dream, but he couldn't be long. And the only thing he knows is me. When he shed his blood on Calvary, now he needs his blood for eternity. Oh, the only thing he wants was me. On the ocean block of sin, this world will turn me down. Satan, they told me, you're nothing but hell. He said you're never gonna win, your soul's forever lost. When I heard how Jesus paid it all on that old rugged cross, and the only thing he loves is me. When he shed his blood on Calvary, now he needs his blood for eternity. When he shed his blood on Calvary, carried by his blood for eternity. Oh, the only thing he was me. That's the only thing he was me. Walk on for Jesus. Walk on in His name. Lifting high the bloodstained banner. Walk on in His name. Your pathway uncertainty lies, search out seem to tell you that there's no reason to try. Walk on for Jesus. Walk on in His name. Lifting high the bloodstained banner. Walk on in His name. Walk on through the shadows where doubts and fears reside. He will crown your faith with victory. If in Him you will abide. Walk on to Jesus. Walk on in His name. Lifting high the bloodstained banner. Walk on in His name. Lifting high the bloodstained banner. Walk on in His When I look around and see the good things He's done for me, I know unworthy are they all. But His blessings He freely gives, I know. I like to give, I've got so much to thank Him for. shelter from the desert, dusty and dry. I was given a drink of water when I thought I would die. Delivered from the dangers of the dark night and sin. Given new life in exchange for my sins. Set free and forgiven. I've been born again. My brother, I have been rescued. I have been rescued. For the throne of God, I have a strong and perfect plea. The great high priest whose name is love, whoever lives and pleads for me. My name is graven on his hands. My name is written on his heart. I know that while in heaven he stands, no time can give me rest. Lord, no time can give me rest. When Satan tempts me to despair and tells me of the guilt within, what word I look and sing him there, who made an end to all my sin. Because a sinless Savior died, my sinful soul is captive free. For not the just is satisfied. Look on him and pardon me. Look on him and pardon me. Behold him there, flowers and lamb, my perfect spotless righteousness, the great unchangeable I am, the King of glory and of grace. One with himself I cannot die, my soul is purchased by his blood. My life is hid with Christ on high. With Christ my Savior and my God. With Christ my Savior and my God. My name is graven on his hands. My name is written on his heart. I know that while in heaven he stands, no time can give me rest. Behold, no time can give me rest.
Hope you enjoy good singing. I enjoy good singing. I'm gonna join one of those groups, those groups in glory one of these days. So now we'll all shout enough. Thank you again tonight for being here. What is the pleasant surprise to sing us, Lord, are you? and the folks from the other girls from Mercy Mountain Academy. A long time, it seemed like a long time, but we're so glad to see you. Thank y'all for coming by. And we appreciate you. Since we, I totally kind of lost track of her, since we know where she's at, we'll see more of her, I'm sure. So, but anyway, thank you again. Thank you. I appreciate all the men of God that have come tonight. And I know what it is. I know what it is to try to work into a schedule and try to get around to make meetings and everything. And I appreciate you taking time and all to be here tonight. Please pray for us. Please pray for this meeting. And if you'll notice, we're talking about reclaiming the next generation. And, the Bible says there's a generation that didn't know God. And so that's so sad that we have a generation following us who needs desperately to know God. Amen. I'm not against activities. Amen. I'm not against these sport events and all of that, but whatever, we just need God. Amen. We need God. We need God more than the air that we breathe. In fact, you're breathing tonight. If you're breathing, God gave you the air to breathe. It depends on Him. And so we want you now just have a mindset turned over. We're not going to receive an offering tonight. Isn't that wonderful? You can breathe a sigh of relief. But Brother Bo Wagner is going to be preaching for us here just in a minute, 3 or 4 or something like that. And if God touches your heart, use your little we'll take care of him, I promise you that. But Brother Gary, let's see if we can't get up, stand up, stretch our legs a little bit, and we got a little course or something we can do. Everybody ought to know. I think that we can do that. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day of the Lord. What? Listen, if you don't know that, we'll sing it through and let you learn about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. She's a way younger than me. I've got to hear somewhere, but. Let's stand up for you. That works. Get up. And all of it. Fruits, rituals out and everything. That's good. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. Every day with Jesus, I love Him more and more. Jesus saves and keeps me, and He's the one I'm living for. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. All right, we'll sing it one more time instead of living for them. We all live, but let's sing what we're looking for tonight. All right, really right back. I put that in there. Here you go. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. Every day with Jesus, I love Him more and more. Jesus saves and keeps me, and He's the one I'm looking for. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. All right, you may be seated. Let's settle down, settle in, and go settle up. Brother Bo, make your way up here, brother. We appreciate you around God. We thank you for coming. And I know you may have saw on the brochure that it said Brother Cody's on, and that didn't work out. Brother Cody overbooked. No, we don't mad with him. He's not mad with us. But I tell folks, I've said this for 50+ years, there's no accident. You bear there, no accidents with God. And so God knew tonight that Brother Bo's supposed to be here, and that he has a message. Now, he's a man of God, I believe he is. If you believe he is, you listen, he has a message from God for you and for me. Brother Bo, go back. Man, it's good to be here tonight. Something to preach 7 minutes ago. I was just saying, well, good to see Miss Lauren and girls home. I appreciate y'all being here. I was going to see the Davises again.
just a lot of good folks. I much appreciate all y'all being here. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm glad it worked out, but I should be here. Now, here we go. I knew somebody canceled on you at the last minute. I did not know that Brother Cody is old. And all I have to say about that is that he would probably be a better preacher, but I'm a lot better looking than he is. I'm kidding. I love Brother Cody and appreciate it. Grab your Bibles, open them to the book of Esther, if you would please. I want you to do what God's laid on my heart. I do my best just to be an encouragement and help you tonight. I love the theme, reclaiming the next generation. Passionate about preaching the next generation. I'm hoping God will use me to be a help and a blessing to them and to you this evening. Esther chapter number 4. When you have found your place in Esther chapter number 4, if you are physically able to do so, you just stand real briefly one more time. I respect and reverence reading God's word. We'll read this text. I'll let you sit right back on Esther chapter number 4. God's good. Esther chapter number 4, verse 1. The Bible says, when Mordecai received all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth of ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and a bitter cry. He came even before the king's gate, for none might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, with the sword of the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing. Many laid sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hilltop, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hilltop went forth to Mordecai under the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make a request before people. And Hilltop came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake unto Hilltop, and gave a commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king and the inner court who is not called, there's one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. I've not been called to come into the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape to the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from other places. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom, say the last phrase with me, for such a time as this. Heavenly Father, bless, I pray, the reading of your word. Lord, may these wonderful words of history and of life get down deep in our hearts. Help us to understand. Help me to accurately preach from them here, and the word to do so in the power of the Holy Ghost of God. Lord, I pray that you take the words spoken tonight and apply it to every heart the way you have it. Lord, may your people be challenged and encouraged and helped, and to be more and more lost. May tonight be the night they come to know you as their Savior. And God, for everything you do, we'll do our very best. Give you praise and glory. It's in Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. I have a couple of questions for you as we begin. Question number 1. Is it always important for us to do right? Very good. Everybody passing the first test. That was a pretty easy one right now. Listen, we can't ramp up the pressure and the intensity just a little bit. Though it is always important for everyone to do right. Does it always, at all times, have the same impact when people do right? Hear a few voices saying no, some heads shaking no, others being very quiet because they're afraid to get anything wrong. Those of you who said no, you're exactly right. It's always important that we do right, but it doesn't always have the same impact. In other words, we can put it this way, there are some times that are so critical that if we do right in those times, we will be forever glad that we did, and God will use it in a very special way. We find one of those times in Esther chapter number 4, and we find it not in an old person, but in a young person. Esther, the queen for whom this book named, is quite likely in her late teens at best when she becomes the heroine of this story. She's a young person that changed the history of mankind just by doing right in a time of danger, just by doing right when it mattered most. Appreciate you moments on the subject, doing right when it really matters. Now, there's several things I want to look at in this passage. I want to begin with the drama of Esther. In order to know why Esther did what she did, why it was so important for her to do what she did, you need to know the drama that is the backstory for what you find in Esther chapter 4. So here's what you need to know. In 606 BC, over 2,600 years ago, the southern kingdom of Israel, known as Judah, was taken into captivity in Babylon. The northern kingdom, known as Israel, had been taken into captivity by Assyria years before. You doubtless remember that the kingdom started under the rule of a man named Saul, and he reigned for 40 years, didn't do a very good job of it. God set him aside. The next king is David. David reigns for 40 years, does an incredible job of it. After David, his son Solomon takes the throne, reigns for 40 years, and the height of the kingdom just increases. But after Solomon's day comes his son, a man by the name of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam has grown up as a spoiled, pampered brat there in the palace. And as soon as he gets on the throne, the children of Israel, all 12 tribes, assemble to him with a very reasonable request. Now they say, your father made things very hard on us. He was trying to build a kingdom, so he taxed us. He took a lot of us as servants. And if you'd just be so kind as to back off a little bit and to lighten the yoke a little bit, we will serve you forever. Rehoboam goes and consults with the old men that were in the presence of his father. The old men give him very wise advice. They say, if you'll serve these people, if you'll do good to these people, you'll win their hearts and they'll serve you forever. But even without asking the young men's counsel, he automatically forsakes it and then goes looking to the young man for other counsel because he's already determined that's not the way he's going to go. The young men give him different counsel. They say, I'll tell you what you tell them. You go tell them that my little finger's going to be thicker than my father's loins, and my father chastised you with whips. I'm going to chastise you with scorpions. Well, that's ridiculous. But nonetheless, he takes that counsel. He goes out to the people. My father's loins were thick, but my little finger's going to be thicker than my father's loins. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. I don't know how it works. But he's something who's going to chastise you with scorpions, and they say, see ya. And 10 tribes leave. 10 tribes split off and form the northern kingdom. He is left with just the tribes of Judah and Benjamin there in the south. They go their divergent ways. The northern kingdom never does have a single good and godly king. They, like I said, go into captivity in Assyria. But the southern kingdom continues on for 130 years, a mixture of good kings and bad kings. But finally, they have so disappointed God, so disrespected his law, so defied his wishes that he sends them into captivity in Babylon for 70 solid years. After the 70-year captivity is over, the next king, a king named Cyrus, gives the decree under the hand of God that they can go home. But here's the thing. Most of them, as far as they were concerned, were home. How many of you, your family is from somewhere else, some other country? Any of you, your family's from some other country out there? I see that hand back there. Where's your family from? The Philippines, okay? Anybody else? Your family was from somewhere else? Yes, sir. Paraguay. We got Philippines, got Paraguay. Where else? Anybody know where your family's from? Anybody else? Philippines, Paraguay? All right, let's take those. If we were to say to you, guess what? You can go home. You'd be looking at us like, what? You mean like down the road? Because you've been here a long time. You've been here, you've established roots here, and this is home to you. You follow that? So when Cyrus says you can go home, a few of them go home, but a very few of them go home. 3 different returns under 3 different leaders. A few of them, a handful, would say go home, but most of them have settled down there. Most of them have been born there. Most of them have had children and grandchildren there, so they are home and they stay. What you are looking at in the book of Esther is the story of those who stay. In fact, this is about 120 years after the captivity began. It is about 50 years after the captivity ended. This is all that they know. So Esther is growing up here in a land that is nothing else than everything she's ever known. This is home to her. This is her story. This is where she lives. Well, the king where she lives is a man by the name of Ahasuerus. You read about him in chapter 1 of Esther. Historians know him by another name. They know him by the name Xerxes. Ahasuerus, Xerxes, was a grade A USDA choice dirt bag. Ahasuerus, Xerxes, was a womanizer when the laws made the Persians forbid such activity. He was a narcissist on one side and down the other, and he had a temper that was about this long and brutally hot. This man who always got what he wanted every time he wanted it and always thought the world revolved around him, marched off to war one day, and he and his army stopped at the house of a supporter of his, a loyal friend by the name of Pythias. Pythias and his old wife had 5 sons. It was their only children. All 5 of them were in Ahasuerus' army. Pythias came to him. This man had been his most loyal friend, had put a lot of money into his military campaigns. He came to him with a very reasonable request. He said, "Sir, all 5 of my children are with you there in the army. All 5 of my sons are soldiers to you. My wife and I are getting older. We're afraid that if anything happens and they all die, that we won't have anybody to take care of us. Could you please just leave us one son to take care of us just in case?" That's a pretty reasonable request for your most loyal friend, isn't it? That's where it says, "You want us to leave a son? I'll leave a son. We'll take that one right there, cut him in half, leave half his body over there, leave half his body over there, march the army out between." And those swollen parents had to watch their boy cut in half his body put over there, half his body put over there, and the army marched between them. This is the Ahasuerus of Esther chapter number 1. Now, as Esther chapter number 1 begins, Ahasuerus is having a pep rally. The reason he's having a pep rally is because he's getting ready to go to war against a new power that's arising in the east, a power by the name of Greece. And he wants everybody fired up before they go to war, and he wants everybody looking to the king before they go to war. This is 180 days of 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? Me. This is what's going on for 180 days. In addition to that, they are drinking for 180 days. Now, when you are a narcissist who has everybody getting drunk for 180 days, can I just let you know nothing good's going to come? Well, after 180 days of everybody being sloshed and singing King's praises, he has another 7 days tacked onto it for all the little people. 180 days is for all the important people. Well, now everybody gets this fate, so now everybody's getting sloshed. And after 187 days of this, the king says, "I got a great idea. Let's bring my beautiful wife Betsy out. Let's get her to parade her beauty before all my drunken buddies and let them lust after her." That's a genius plan. Well, his wife knows how wrong it is. It is against morality, obviously, but it is also against the customs and laws of the Medes and the Persians. The queen, more than anybody else, is to be secluded from the public gaze. So she said back word, "No, I'm not coming." This is to the guy who just got somebody in half. Follow this? So this guy, who is not used to being told no, looks at his drunken counselors, his drunken buddies, and says, "What are we going to do? She just insulted me in front of everybody." Well, his drunken counselors come up with advice that only drunken counselors can come up with. She didn't just hurt you. She hurt us too, right here. She hurt all of us, King. And when this word gets out and she disrespected you, ain't no man in all your kingdom going to get no respect. They're all going to get all uppity, King. A little bit of overkill, don't you think? Trouble. Well, they come up with a solution. Why don't you just divorce her? 5 minutes earlier, she's the greatest thing in the world. He wants everybody to see how beautiful she is, and now he takes her advice and divorces her. Now, the thing about being drunk and stupid is that eventually you wake up and realize you've been drunk and stupid. So he wakes up, and he doesn't have his great wife anymore, but they still got their wives. Now we got a problem, and they know they're in the firing line today, so they got a solution. Handy dandy right there. "Hey, King, we got a solution for you. While you're away at war, we'll have ourselves a beauty pageant. We will go through all 187 provinces from Ethiopia to India, 4,000 miles in a line, 100 million people in your kingdom. We will find all the most beautiful girls in all of your kingdom, hold a beauty pageant, and when you get back, you pick the one that you like the best to be your new wife. He says, start the plan. Then he marches off to war, having had his home destroyed. Needless to say, his mind is not right in the battle, and it is a disaster. His navy of 1,400 ships is destroyed by a smaller navy of 280 ships. His army is routed. He comes home 4 years later, wounded and licking his wounds, and in a foul mood. This is the drama of Esther. This is what she's about to be right in the middle of. So see the drama of Esther. Verse number 2, the delight of Esther. Now Esther herself has another name. Her original name is Hadassah. Her Jewish name Hadassah means myrtle, after a tree. Esther is her Persian name. It means star. But this girl Esther is somebody that does not have a mother and father. Her mother and father died somewhere on the way. So her old cousin, a man named Mordecai, is raising this girl, just like she was his own daughter. When the beauty pageant takes place, she is living right there in the palace. They're looking over 187 provinces, 4,000 miles in a line, 100 million people, and there's this beautiful girl living right in the palace. God's people have the most amazing coincidences, don't they? Because God's always way ahead of us no matter what's going on. This beautiful girl is living right there in the palace. She gets noticed. She gets drafted into the beauty pageant. And before she goes, her aged cousin Mordecai, her adopted father, says, don't tell them what race of people you are yet. Don't tell them you're a Jew, because they've had enough experience to know that it usually goes pretty bad when that gets out in that part of the world. So he says, just hold that now, don't tell anybody. Yes, the Bible says, obey his word, like when she grew up with him. So she says, yes, sir, won't tell him how. Well, the beauty pageant gets underway, and the king begins to examine all the girls, and would you believe it? Out of 187 provinces, 4,000 miles of line from India to Ethiopia, out of 100 million people, this girl, Esther, who grows up in the palace, becomes the queen of the Persian Empire. How about that? God knows what he's doing. But from Esther's perspective, this is her delight. Girls get it. She's now literally princess, a queen. You follow this? She's royalty. She's got a crown on her head. She now lives the most luxurious of quarters. Anything her heart could possibly desire, she has it. All is good for Esther. Have you had those times every now and again? I know you're going to be brief. Where you felt like everything was coming up roses. You ever had those times every now and then? They don't come around very often, do they? But every now and then, you have those times where it's like, man, this is awesome. I'm going through life and I'm going through the gravy train on biscuit wheels. This is the greatest thing ever, man. I can't believe how good things are going. This girl is having the time of her life right now. We see her drama. We see her delight. She's now queen of the Persian Empire, but I want thirdly to get to her dilemma. After she becomes queen, things begin to happen there in the book of Esther. One thing that begins to happen is a couple guys are upset with the king. Their names are Bigthan and Teresh. They were probably upset because of the way the battle with Greece went, because of his defeat. They believe he's a weakened monarch. So they make plans to kill him. And the thing is, as his chamberlains, the keeper of the door, they have access to him. They can do it. So they're whispering. They're talking. They're laying their plans on how to kill the king. But there's an old man who just sits around and listens to things real carefully. His name is Mordecai. And this old man Mordecai overhears their plot. And this old man Mordecai, his adopted daughter, just so happens to be the new queen of the Persian Empire. Amazing coincidence. So he gets a hold of his adopted daughter, Esther. He says, you better know they're out to kill your husband. Tell him Bigthan and Teresh can try to assassinate him. Inquiry is made of the matter. It is found out. Bigthan and Teresh are put to death on the spot, because that's just the kind of guy Ahasuerus is. He's not going to put up much. So they're killed, and Mordecai should be getting rewarded, and they forget to reward him. That is one of the greatest breaches of protocol in the Oriental world you could ever have, for a monarch to forget to reward somebody for something they've done like that. But God is saving that card for later. Well, after this happens, the king decides to put a new chief advisor in. And the man he puts in as his chief advisor, his grand vizier, is a man by the name of Haman. When you think of Haman, think of Jafar. Yes, O king. Oh, anything you wish, O king. He is like the walking, talking Jafar of the ancient world. I mean, he's going to suck up at every turn and stab you in the back as soon as he gets a chance. And this guy becomes the second in command of the Persian Empire, and he is a snake waiting to strike. Well, as he goes about his days, the king has given a command that everybody bow before him. And it's not just about respect for the king as a man, it is about worship that the king is demanding. Now, there's one old man there that's not going for that. Because he's a Jew, and he knows you only bow to one, and that's to God. The old man's name is Mordecai. So this guy, Haman Jafar, comes out into the streets, and he's waiting for people to bow, and he gets before Mordecai, and Mordecai says, ain't bowing. Ain't bowing, sir. Ain't bowing. Not going to happen. Bow. Ain't bowing. Bow. Ain't bowing. And he just stands there and won't bow. Dude has to walk around him. Now he's mad as he can be. He says, who's that old man that won't bow? He says, his name's Mordecai. You want us to kill him? No, I don't want you to kill him. I want you to find out what race of people he's from. They bring word back. Did some checking into the background. Looked at his Facebook page. Turns out he's a Jew. And Haman says, good. Kill them all. You mean the ones in the palace? No. You mean the ones in Persia? No. Kill every Jew in the world. All of the provinces of Ahasuerus. Destroy them all! Now we've got ourselves in the 2,000 years after Pharaoh tried it. 2,000 years before before Hitler thought of it. There's a man who's going to try a Holocaust on the Jewish people. He's going to wipe out every Jew on the face of the planet. This is a real serious dilemma we have going through. Posts go out with the date. The date has been decided by the casting of pearls, the casting of lots. It has ended up on the last month of the year. Again, another coincidence, because God knows how to give people time to get ready for things. But the posts go out telling that the Jews are to be killed on a certain date. Thing is, this guy doesn't know that Esther just so happens to be a Jew. Well, Mordecai, him again, reads the post and finds out what has happened. He realizes there's about to be a Holocaust, so he sends to his adopted daughter, hey, Esther, you need to know this. We're about to be destroyed. You need to go in and speak to your husband because you have the king's ear and the king's heart. Go talk to him. Tell him what's about to happen. And she says, I can't. Now, that had to be a little bit confusing the first time you heard that. It had to be a matter of you what? Everybody's about to be killed. We're all going to be killed. And you can't go talk to him. Tell me why you can't go talk to him. She sends word back. I can't go talk to him. Because the law of the means of the versions is that unless I'm called for, unless anybody is called for, when you go into that two-part inner chamber, when you go in that second part of the chamber, if the king does not hold out his scepter to you, no matter who you are killed on the spot. Say, preacher, where did that come from? Years before, there was another Persian king by the name of Deioces. He came up with this great idea to feed his own ego, that if the king didn't hold out the scepter, that whoever came in was to be killed by the guards immediately. That just stays on the books. And nowadays, Ahasuerus, another guy who loves that kind of thing, now Esther finds herself in trouble. She says, I've not been called to see my husband for 30 days. There's some kind of a falling out in the home. He's found some disfavor in her for some reason. And she says, if I go in, and if he doesn't hold out the scepter, I'm going to die. I can't go in. I got a question. Did Esther have, humanly speaking, a legitimate reason to be afraid? Sure she did. Was this a legitimate time of danger for Esther? Absolutely. So we see the drama of Esther, the delight of Esther, the dilemma of Esther. Let's look at the decision of Esther. Mordecai sends back to Esther the most immortal words of the Old Testament, perhaps. He says, you have come to the kingdom for, what's the words? For such a time as this. In other words, he's saying, Esther, do you think it is a coincidence that you grew up so beautiful? Do you think it's a coincidence that you grew up right here in the palace? Do you think it's a coincidence that you got put to the front of the line in the beauty pageant? Do you think it's a coincidence that God made you the queen of the Persian Empire? None of this is an accident. None of it is happenstance. None of it is coincidence. You are where you are because God put you here for exactly this moment in time. Esther, step up and do what you need to do. Esther, I know you're afraid. I know it's dangerous, but step up and do what you need to do. Esther, having gotten that word, sends back to him, fast for me for 3 days. My maidens and I will fast for 3 days, and then I will go in and I will see the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. She goes to prayer and fasting for 3 days because her life's on the line, and you do the same thing if your life's on the line. She goes fasting and praying for 3 days. After 3 days, she shows up there in her royal finery in the court. The king sees her. She catches his eye. Maybe there's a moment of hesitation, not sure, but he holds out that golden scepter. She reaches out and puts her hand on the scepter. Inside, she's going, yeah! Because she knows she gets to live through the night. The king says to her, what wilt thou, my queen? I will give thee anything thou desirest to the half of thy kingdom. And kings always said stuff like that. Nobody ever took them up on the offer because to do that was to become an enemy and lose your life. So they never were that dumb, but this was still a blank check. She's being offered the world. Whatever she wants, she can have. And she says, how do I have the kingdom? I don't want new shoes. I don't want more camels. I don't want beauty products. I just want you and Jafar, Haman. That's what you and Haman. I want you to come to a banquet I got prepared for you. Come on, clear my schedule. Me and you going to a banquet. A few minutes later, they are there at the banquet. Haman, for his part, thinks he is having the greatest time of his life. Everything's coming up roses for the snake. And the king there at the banquet asks her the same thing again. Honey, what do you want? I'll give you anything at all, even to have my kingdom. She said, I don't have the kingdom. I don't want my camels. I don't want jewels or beauty products. I want you to come to the banquet tomorrow too. He just cleared my schedule. Me and you going to the banquet tomorrow. My wife is being mysterious. I love what she's doing. We're going to find out about it. The dude leaves there that day, walking on clouds till his cloud runs into a storm named Mordecai. Walks out in the street. Here's the old man again. Ain't bowing. Bow. Ain't bowing. Ain't bowing. He literally has to walk around him based on what the text says. So he goes home, and now he's got a mixture of emotions going on. Now he's real thrilled over all that's happening, but he's still as angry as a hornet over this old man won't bow. And he tells his family, he says, look, I've got all this wealth and power. I got my wife. I got 10 kids. King is maybe the second in command. Only me, the queen, got to go in. But none of this means anything as long as that old man won't bow. And his wife, Zeresh, says, why don't you just build a 75-foot tall gallows and hang him on? 75-foot tall to hang somebody? Again, isn't that a little bit overkill? You can hang somebody like on 7 or 8 feet. She wants it 75 feet high. She's going to send a message. Everybody, don't you mess with my man. So he goes and starts the construction process. He's going to hang Mordecai on a gallows. The guy's got 75 feet high. Well, that night, the king just so happens to not be able to sleep because, again, God brings the most amazing coincidences, doesn't he? He can't sleep, so he says, bring me the chronicles of the kings of Persia. And the chronicles of the kings of Persia were a lot like the chronicles you find in your Bible. So-and-so beget so-and-so beget so-and-so beget so-and-so. And don't you be pious, because you know that's what you read when you do sleep. You don't read that for the exciting stuff. There's very few. There are a few exciting things there, but not a whole lot. You read that when you want to sleep. So he said, bring me something I can sleep by. But just like the Chronicles of the Bible, every now and then something jumps out and pops. They start reading those Chronicles, and they just so happen, preacher. Amazing how many things just so happen in God's county. They just so happen to come across this tale from not too long back when the king was about to be killed, and this guy named Mordecai heard of the plot and told Esther. Esther told the king, this guy saved his life, and he says, what was done for this old man? They said, nothing. Now the king knows he's got a problem, because again, that's a real serious breach of protocol. King says, is there anybody out there in the court at this time of night? Well, it just so happens because everything just so happens, because most of it is coincidence with God. It just so happens this guy, Haman, Jafar, is out there in the court wanting to see the king. And he says, tell him to come on in. Haman comes on in, and the king says, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? He says, who would the king delight to honor more than one? He says, let the king put him on a royal steed with a crown on his head and a robe, and let the most loyal prince and noble prince lead him through the streets and say, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. King says, that's great. You go do it for Mordecai. What? He can't believe he's hurt, but he's hurt. He has to go out and see Mordecai. The old man won't bow. Mordecai's got to be like, you again? Comes out. He's ready for the order to bow. But he ain't bowing. Instead he gets, Mordecai, by order of the king, I'm commanded to put this crown on your head, and this robe, and put you on this horse, and I need to lead you the street. Today is Mordecai Day. We're going to have a Mordecai parade. Thus shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. That's the greatest thing I've ever heard, man. Don't you love the way God does stuff? He goes home, he is miserable. He tells his wife what's about to happen, and Mrs. Encouragement says, well, he's unseated you before you've done all. You're a dead man, thanks, honey. Well, he's forgotten all that what comes next, but God hadn't forgotten. Knock comes on the door. They open the door. By order of the king, Haman is commanded to come to the banquet with Esther and the king. Oh, we forgot all about that. He don't want to go anywhere right now, preacher. He wants to lay his head on him and go, go away. I mean, he don't want to have anything to do with anybody right now. But he's got to go because it's ordered. So he goes into the banquet. He is in a foul mood. And the king says again, honey, what do you want? Anything. The half of my kingdom. And she says, I don't have your kingdom. I just want to live. I want my people to be able to live. We're about to be killed. King's now listening. He is enraged. Who would dare do such a thing? Him! That guy! Right there! That dirtbag! That's the one! Bad day for him. The king is enraged and unsure what to do. He walks outside in the garden to collect his thoughts. This dude knows he's in trouble now, so he goes to beg the queen. She is reclining on a low couch like everybody did in the Persian Empire. He trips on the way over there, to the most amazing coincidence is that one. God's involved. He trips and falls on the bed right as the king is walking back in and sees the dude falling on his wife. Will he force the queen before me? And two dudes put a sack over his head. The last sight he saw was Esther. And they say, what are you going to do with him? And so one of the guys says, there's a 75-foot tall gallows that you can hang Mordecai on. Hang him on it. God, hang on his own gallows. Esther explains what happens. The Jews are given an order to defend themselves. Esther says, King, they're only going to attack one day supposedly, but I know they'll hit after the bell's done. Can we defend ourselves for 2 days? He says, give the order. Posts go out and take the order all across the known world. When Purim comes around, they defend themselves on the first day. They get hit again the second day. They defend themselves on the second day. An entire race of people survives because of the decision of one young lady when it mattered the most. Listen to me. Her going to see her husband 2 months before that really wouldn't have mattered. Her going to see her husband a year after that really wouldn't have mattered. You know what mattered most? When she was the scariest. You know what mattered most? When the whole world was falling in around her. You know what mattered most? When she had the most to lose. Let's be real careful. We're in that time again. Young people, listen. We're in that time again. It's always been important for you to do right in worship. Can we agree on that? And now we're in the time when it really matters most because the entire world's falling in and the church is under attack. It's always been important for you to live right and have a good testimony, but it matters more than ever now because righteousness is being attacked everywhere you turn. It's always mattered for you to go out and win souls, but it matters now more than ever because people are dying and going to hell in droves, and it's a dangerous time to be doing so because everybody's afraid of anybody even knocking on the door and speaking to them. Everything that matters now more than ever. When you face those times of danger, that's when it really matters most. If you make the right decision, you may be shocked at what God does with it. In Esther's day, she, in her time of danger, made the decision to save her people's life. In the 1970s, the Soviet Union was a different kind of decision. There was a young man who grew up on the streets of Novosibirsk. He was an orphan. The Soviet Union was an official atheistic state. No talk or belief of God was allowed. The young man grew up on the streets. He became a big, strong guy. His name was Sergei Kordakov. He was noticed when he got to be an older teen, conscripted into the armed services like every young man was in the Soviet Union, really started to work his way up through the ranks. He got called to KGB headquarters one night, and that was always a scary thing, no matter how tough you were. He got there at KGB headquarters, sat down there across the desk from the guy, was a KGB officer, said, well, what do you need from me? He said, I need you to gather 4 or 5 big, tall, tough, strong men and come back in 2 weeks. We have an assignment for you. It's all right. Do just a minute. Went back and gathered some wrestlers and some weightlifters and men who had no heart and no conscience. They showed back up there 2 weeks later and said, what do you need from us? They said, we need you to destroy the greatest enemy of the Soviet Union. I mean, these people are ruining the country. They're undermining everything we stand for. The country's going to fall if they're not rooted out. You need to find them. They said, who is it? Who is it? We'll find it. We'll do it. The guy said, it's Christians. First Kordakov said, wait a minute, I don't understand. I thought Christians were just a few old, crazy people. I mean, nuts, but harmless. He said, no, you don't understand. We're an atheistic state. Every fiber of our being is founded on that one truth. If they're allowed to continue to propagate their heresy, the Soviet Union's going to fall. We can't survive if we don't stamp them out. And he whipped them into a frenzy. And they said, we'll go after them. How do we find them? He said, they have secret Christian meetings, but we have spies everywhere. We know how to tell you where to go. You go through your duties Monday through Friday at base. Come here on Friday evening. We'll feed you the information, give you your pay. You go do what you want, kill them, beat them, don't care. Just put them out of commission, and then you can go back and have time the rest of the weekend. And weekend after weekend, the same thing happened. They went there, got information about the secret Christian meetings. They go in, kick the door in. There'd be a handful of gray-haired people. They'd beat them up, kill them, leave them there in their blood, march off. Same thing happened week after week after week until one week something changed. One week they kicked open the door. And there was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 17-year-old girl named Natasha. They beat everybody severely that night, including her. One of the men picked her up over his head, threw her head high in the back wall. Her head hit the wall. She was unconscious before she ever hit the ground. They left that night. The guy was laughing. That's how you beat a Christian. You'll never see her at another Christian meeting. 1 week later, they kicked in another Christian meeting, and there was a few old people and a 17-year-old girl, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Natasha. They took the girl and put her up on a table. Some men held her down, and Sergei Kordakov beat her backside until she's bleeding all over the place, and blood was spattering the wall, and she's crying uncontrollably. They shoved her off onto the floor. They left, and Kordakov said, boys, that's how you be a Christian. You'll never see her at another meeting. They kicked in the door of another meeting 1 week later, standing because she couldn't sit. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl named Natasha. The biggest man, enraged, the entire group moved in to kill the girl. And when that happened, something happened nobody could have seen coming. The toughest man, the meanest man in the group got in between them and said, stop! Nobody touches her. She's got something we don't have. Nobody touches her. Kordakov realized things were going bad in a hurry. He got the girl at the back door and said, girl, whoever you are, just run, just run, just run. But he couldn't shake those words. She has something we don't have. She has something we don't have. She has something we don't have. And he realized she did, and that something was God. He didn't even know what to call him because they had no God there in the east. He just started calling him the God of the west, and he knew he had to find him. So he got himself transferred to a naval detachment so he could escape to the west. He wouldn't try America because he heard so many bad things about America, but he decided to try to escape to Canada. The ship was to be just a few miles offshore of the Canadian shore that night, and a storm pushed it further offshore, but in the cold of the night, he knew he had to try, so he dove into the water and started swimming for the lights of the distant shore. He swam for an hour, reached out and touched something hard, and the choppy waters realized he'd swam in a gigantic circle and come right back to the boat. He knew they knew he was gone now. He knew they'd be looking for him, and if he called out for help, He knew he'd be sent to a concentration camp and never find God on the list. So he pushed off again and started swimming. Never knew how close he got to the shore. He passed down in the water that night, and the water shoved his body up on the shore. He was found by some fishermen the next morning, barely alive. They took him to the hospital. When he woke up 2 weeks later in the hospital, the first thing he said was, "Can anybody tell me about the God is?" They brought a preacher in, and that guy came to know Jesus Christ as his Savior. He wrote a book. It used to be called Forgive Me, Natasha. Now it's called The Persecutor. And he opened the eyes of the West to what was going on behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. And that book is one of the little things God used to bring the Iron Curtain down. One girl did what was right when it cost the most, when it was the scariest. And God used it to change the world. What could he do with a group this size? Who decided tonight, I will always do what's right. No matter how scared I am, no matter the cost, no matter the pushback, I will always do what's right. So I'll stand there, but I was closing. Have someone come to the piano, if someone comes, you're ready to lead him an invitation. Please know we're looking around. Everything about God close this time. We've got some questions. If you're here tonight, and you can say, "Preacher, I know that I'm saved. I have repented of my sins. I've trusted in Christ here on Calvary. If I died before I even got in the parking lot, I know for a fact I'd go to heaven." If you can say that, we'll just look at it right to see it. God bless you. Put them down. Many hands to be raised. Some could not. I appreciate you being honest. Thank you so much. You know, right now, you may be pretty scared. Now's when it matters most. If you got saved, imagine how many others might get saved right behind you. Now's when it matters most. Now's the world needs to see people forsaking their false mistake and coming to Christ. So if you don't know that you're saved, when we begin to sing and the invitation begins, I'm asking you to just come down to the altar and slip your hand up as you do, and we'll send somebody the Bible to show you tonight how to receive Jesus Christ as your Savior. But before we do that, Sean, I've got a question for you. I wonder how many of you are facing a time of fear and danger right now. You've got some hard decisions to make. You've been a little bit scared to make those decisions. Can I see your hand right? I see you. Slip my hand. God bless you. 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 See hands going across the auditorium. Listen very carefully. Tonight, you need to make up your mind and bow before God that you're going to do right no matter how scary it seems. You're going to do right no matter what it may cost. You're going to do right no matter what the potential pushback. Would you do that? Would you make your vow to always do right no matter how dangerous? As we sing, the altar's open. Would you come? Step out and come right now. The altar's open. You just come. Step out and come. Go ahead and place it. Here we go. Folks are making way to the altar right now. This will start shortly. Would you just come? Altar's open. Some are already here. Altar's open. Folks are slipping out. Would you come? Come join these folks who are coming. God bless you. Good. Folks still moving. Just come on, join. There's folks moving all around. Would you come join? Whatever you need. If you need somebody to pray with you, get hold of somebody. Slip your hand up, we'll send somebody. Don't leave here tonight. You're not saved, you're not completely right with God. Altar's open, folks are still moving. Hey, you couldn't raise your hand a minute ago that you were saved. From any point to this tabernacle, you're only a few steps to the altar. You're that close to becoming a new creature in Christ. You're that close. Don't be afraid. Step out and come. We'll send somebody to help you. And you'll never regret it. You're still open wherever you need. Come on.
wonder if we really let the Lord have his way tonight. I sat there and I thought, I've been at this thing a long time, God bless me. I'm celebrating 50 years of being pastor of this church. This message you could preach 20 years ago, you're hardly an empty seat under this tabernacle. We got to the point in the place where that, I guess, although we are afraid, we're afraid, we're ashamed, I don't know. But my challenge to you tonight is that God has his way. Amen. I can't imagine what history. I always loved the story of history. I probably read it several times a year. I just like that story. And, she was an underdog. You can't talk to her. So to speak. I love it. I love it. But for times such as this, a time when we have a society that doesn't want God, doesn't want his word, doesn't want his rules, doesn't want his regulations. I'm afraid for you. I'm afraid for my 8 grandchildren. I blessed with one great and got a great on the way. I'm afraid for you. Just me. I thank you tonight. There's not even 8:30 yet. I appreciate you coming out. And hopefully you haven't got chilly or anything. Appreciate things you're sitting in your own. My desire is you be safe going home. And if you'll come back tomorrow. And we're going to go through Thursday on this scheduled meeting. I told somebody today, I said, wouldn't it be wonderful that whenever we go through the scheduled part, God says that we ain't done. And just think up and go somewhere. That'd be great and wonderful. And give that to you, that'd be good. Thank you again for coming. Brother Robert, it's good to see you tonight, buddy. So would you ask God's blessing on our folks to stay safe at home, have to take what God said tonight, speak to our home.
Well, Father, Lord, we just rejoice being under this pavilion tonight, dear God. Hear the preaching the word of God, hear the family sing a little bit ago, just thank you for Brother Brian and his family. And Lord, Brother Bud, Lord, has been such a blessing to us through the years. Lord, I just thank you for what he preached tonight, what you did in my heart. I pray you get him safe and traveling back, dear God. Just be with everyone, the folks here at Hilltop, the visitors, and Sister Lori, and the girls on there, dear God, pray you bless them and they travel tonight as well. Just give us all safety in the meeting the rest of this week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Take one off.